Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 110 of Into the Outer Realms. I am your host, Joey Medea, but I am going to be having a lot of help along the way in 2022, and I'm very excited to have. We kind of have sort of a double delight, I guess you could call it tonight. Not only are my two guests official contributors to the show, which means they're more than guests. They've been guests. They're very popular with our guests. They're very articulate. They have a high level of research capability and delivery. They're very articulate. But not only are they contributors of the show, which I'm so honored, but they're also witch practitioners. And they're going to be doing most of the talking tonight, which I absolutely love. So I told them that I'm just going to sort of set the stakes for what's going to be a very interesting conversation. Why? Because of the subject matter, but also because they're so passionate and they live it. I had a very bad experience with a coven, Tanya and I, many years ago, where what they were doing it for, I believe, was corrupted. If we have an opportunity to talk about that tonight, we will. Otherwise, just leave it at that. But these guys are the real deal. I'm excited to learn and share and spend the evening with them and with all of you. I'm going to run the intro. I'm going to come back, say hello in the chat room, set the stakes, and then we're off.
There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon. The preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts, because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, the couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms.
Alrighty, pop into the chat room real quick here. Hello, Lori. Lori's welcoming our contributors. So let's do that without DLA. Ciel and Michael. I don't have to read bios. I don't have to do any of that because the audience knows exactly who you are. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being contributors.
Of course. It's like old hat now.
Yeah, and Ciel, this is her first contributor show, which is awesome and a great Mario. Good evening. So, like I said, I want to set the stakes, and then I'm really going to turn this over to you guys. We do have an outline to work from, so you can handle it any way you want. If I have something to chime in on, I will, but I'm going to listen. But we're going to talk about fact and fiction, and some of it's fun, some of it's heavier than other aspects of it. So I just want to remind everyone about in America, they were most famous in Salem in the 1600s. But really, Scotland is what I have studied because of the work I'm doing with Angus and with the Canon and the Quill and all of that. But in Scotland, 4,000 to 6,000 people in the late 1500s, and then from about 1620 to about 1660, it died down actually during the Restoration and all, and then flared back up after Cromwell was gone for a little bit. There were Witchfinder Generals. These people were professional witch finders who would look for birthmarks and marks of Satan. There were people called prickers, and they would prick you, and depending on where they pricked you, whether you bled or not, determined if you were a witch. Now, the figures seem to be that over the course of these decades during this time period, from the time of the Witchcraft Act, was in 1563. Really, all because, especially in Scotland, King James, while his bride-to-be was crossing the ocean, there was a terrible storm. Storms happen. But he was like, oh, someone put a curse and is trying to kill my new bride. So he wrote a book called Demonology. That Witchcraft Act was not repealed until 1736. So still primitive in some ways, but interesting. This all kind of gets a happy face and a little bit of comedy before I turn it over to my esteemed colleagues here. And of course, Monty Python's Holy Grail, which there are ways of telling a witch. She turned me into a newt, but I got better. And there are, but today, Ohio, this whole mid-Ohio Valley, but especially in West Virginia, if you're a witch or practitioner, people talk about you. They whisper about you. They don't like your ghost walks. They post nasty things about you. So obviously not being burned at the stake, not being banished from your village or pricked or poked or shaved or beaten. But these things linger. So welcome, Ciel and Michael. Take it away, folks.
I have to just start off by saying how ironic that we're talking about witches and Ciel has to be the stereotypical witch popping in on the screen.
Needle has joined me. Some needle action there.
Oh, the familiar. Awesome.
Yeah, she was up here the second. Yeah, so tail here.
I love it. So y'all want to start by talking about what is magic? Is magic fantasy? Is magic real? Is it both? How do we tell the difference?
It's both. Point blank, it's both. There's fantasy magic, there's real magic, just like other religions are portrayed in a fantasy way and move the reality of it. It's no different. Magic, you say the word magic though, and it just sounds fantastical no matter how you spin it. So it's harder to differentiate the two. It's harder to get people to take it seriously between the two. Because, like they hear the word and they're like, oh, well, that's merely just make believe or, whatever.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misconceptions with that is we talk about practicing magic and people automatically think we're sitting there completely cloaked, holding a wand, having rays of something coming out, and none of it looks like that.
I know. There's some very serious people. Dean Radin, who's a neurologist and runs a parapsychology lab, and that has its own problems and all. But he wrote a book called Real Magic about energy, vibration, intention have effects. They have effects, and some of them are not explainable. Synchronicity is a form of magic. But also, too, Arthur C. Clarke said his third law was that any sufficiently advanced technology or culture is indistinguishable from magic. So It's maybe just a gap in understanding between the hard reality and the...
I believe that. I do believe that. I actually, I'm often known for saying that I believe that magic is just science we haven't been able to quantify yet.
Yeah. And part of my belief to it, adding to what Ciel said, is being that we use such a small portion of our actual brain, we're just able to tap into a percentage of it that others can't. So
that's very, very well put. And that's where the practitioner comes in. That's where the practice.
Right. The discerning practitioner, let me say, the discerning practitioner.
Yeah, which probably does not involve worshiping Satan. And Satan is a complex. We did a show on angels and demons with some other contributors. We're going to do a part 2. It's a fascinating conversation. But Satan is often misunderstood, and Satanism and all those things. It's not why we're here tonight.
And the thing is, there are satanic witches, just like there are Christian witches, there are Jewish witches. Witchcraft is a practice. It's not a spirituality in and of itself for most people. For many people, it becomes one in the... but in general, it's a practice. It's a craft. And it can be hand in hand with any faith or no faith. I do know atheist and agnostic witches as well. So there are in fact satanic witches, but like you said, the concept of Lucifer and Satan is a very misunderstood idea.
Yeah, and then there's the Church or the Temple of Satan. I have a very dear friend who runs the one in Seattle. It's not a small affair, and what they're up to would surprise a lot of people in a very positive way. She's writing books about it, which are selling very well, thank goodness. Hello, Stephen. I'm wearing the Buckland Museum with the Baphomet, also misunderstood. The Undoing of the Knights Templar. I'm reading a great book about them. Where we have here Appalachian witches. Yes, I'm studying them.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, ringing. This is fascinating. I was watching a documentary. Taking a cloth and wringing it out, and cow's milk coming out of the cloth. This was like a folk thing in Appalachian witch. It's surprising what they believed in Appalachia, because when we had new mystics, they ran us out of town, and it turns out we were pretty tame compared to their grandmothers and grandfathers. Somebody's mic keeps being moved, causing a loud sound. Oh, thank you. Okay, we'll all be careful with our mics. So witchcraft trends.
I do actually have to laugh at the one comment you posted from Theta saying eating children and dancing naked in the woods.
Yeah.
Now, I actually am not a fan of children at all. So that part is completely fake. But the dancing in the woods thing, that one might be up for debate a little bit, because that kind of does happen sometimes.
I glossed right over that, and I've actually written a song, and the witches in the song dance naked beneath the harvest moon. That's the lyric, because that's pretty damn cool.
And it is a thing. It's a legitimate thing. It's called skyclad. The idea is that wearing clothes hinders your ability to connect with the energy and hinders energetic flow. It's meant to just unhinder energetically and open yourself to spirit fully. Now, that's not to say that there are not groups that, dance naked around the fire and then engage in other shenanigans, but
yeah, I mean, sex magic is a thing.
It's a thing. And I don't mean to downplay it. It is absolutely a thing.
Yeah, and not harmful. I don't want to go off the rails, because you guys have a really
right.
great
We have a point, right?
But there was a book that I read, and I wish I could remember it. This whole thing about satanic cults and witches and all that. There were these claims in this book, like a preacher had a big radio show, and this girl comes to him and says, I'm escaping this cult, and part of what we do is eat babies. And you hear this every once in a while. I remember a contributor to the show a couple months ago, there was somebody on Oprah Winfrey who claimed that their family ate babies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure
but
they do.
I think
I'm sure they exist.
This is not what we're talking about here.
No. It's a small percentage, but there's always going to be.
Andy, we're going to talk about that later.
Oh, you know how I feel about witch talk. Doing this on purpose. Okay.
So, how about trends in the media?
Trends in the media, we tend to go in trends. I think every few years, witches tend to come up as a trend. I don't know if it's just they're out of ideas and circling back around, or if
part of me thinks too it has to do with which TV and movie shows are happening when they're happening. Like I noticed, and I think you guys can probably speak for this as well, but back in the mid 90s when Sabrina the Teenage Witch came around, granted that was a very fluff version of it, but when that show happened, people started, I'm a witch, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. A few years later, The Craft came about. People were like, I'm a witch. And then that kind of died out. So I think a lot of it has to do too with things that are trending and causing it to kind of resurface when it does. So,
right.
But I'm sorry, Ciel, I didn't cut you off.
Yeah, that actually speaks to the point that I was attempting to make, that, we do tend to trend. We can tend to come back up in the media. There tend to be movies and series and books and whatever that are witch centric, and the movies do certainly play into the trends culturally. Literally, if I never get asked if I worship Manon ever again, I'm totally fine with that. But like you said, I do think that show speaks to the trends. I don't know why we tend to trend every few years. Some people have hypothesized trend in the media when there is a need for the strong feminine archetype to be present.
Ooh, look at you getting super technical over here.
Super fan. We'll take it. Very good.
I mean, that's
But
what it is. Like, I read essays about this, hypothesizing that this is a need for that archetype, and witchcraft is political. Witchcraft has always been an activist tradition. It's a political tradition. Witchcraft is the practice of the oppressed, because it is literally self-realizing yourself and your own divinity and your own power, and it gives power to the oppressed. And I think that when there's a high amount of feminine oppression, the archetype of the witch tends to resurge.
So let's talk before we move on here, because they're here. I love the film Practical Magic. It did make me want to be a witch, date a witch. Tanya, Tanya has practiced. I actually love the villains in that movie, and then I love the two old crazy ants, right?
Soccer Channing, hands down.
The witches themselves, not so much. Especially Nicole Kidman's character. But how about Charmed, right? Wasn't it about a year ago that one of the producers of Charmed came out and apologized for the show, the original, and said, yeah, I wish we had never done it, and I think it did damage to women, and Alyssa Milano, who's never short of opinions, kind of came out and said, no, the show was empowering, and so Ciel, what's your position on the original Charmed?
I can see their point, to be honest with you. I can see both points, to be fair. I can see that it is very female empowered. The Charmed ones are here to save the world, and it's 3 women who are meant to do it. They're the most powerful beings in the world, and it's women. So yes, there's empowerment. And as the series progresses, they become more powerful physically, not just magically. Like, they learn to fight, so they become more empowered in all areas of their lives as they move on. That being said, the women featured are very specific types of women, very centric to a very type of cute, hot, young, completely healthy, completely fit, all of these stereotypes. And they basically personify the stereotype of the witch in the media, is that it's a young, oversexed, really hypersexualized, cute, buxom, all of those things. And that's you're looking at the reality of what a witch actually is. We're two of one of the most common types of people you see in our communities. So in that way, I do think that it kind of played into that stereotype that you got to be young, cute, and sexy to be a witch. And there were some storylines that I found problematic. Very problematic, like the Phoebe Cole thing, Lord.
But it was very cartoony, even more so, I think, than Buffy. You knew you were watching, at least to me, because Tanya and I just watched them last year. We got all the seasons with Sharon Doherty, because I stopped there, but never mind. I just did. But so how about the specific characters, right? The central characters of, say, Samantha from Bewitched and going to Charm, which you talked about quite a bit already. But there's also Sabrina that you could put in there.
Actually, talking about Samantha from Bewitched, Ciel and I had this whole lovely conversation about toxic masculinity based in that show and talking about the female empowerment. So Ciel, take it away.
About Bewitched. I loved it as a kid. I really did. But even as a little girl, I could not handle the fact that Dagwood or whoever was over here you must stop being a witch, you must give up your powers, you must be a mundane housewife and live normally and cater to my every whim. I am the man. I was just like, girl, leave him right now.
Yeah.
Right now. Go run your butt's on fire back to the witch realm. Go. Or all the way. Still am. Love her. What Endora do. Kind of my thing.
Yeah. I was going to say, the mom was wicked, though. She was great. No pun intended.
Endora was the business right there. I love it. I was she is gold, ultimately.
Steven is right. The auction house is Buckland's, isn't it? In Charmed.
Was it? That's right. It was.
Oh, yeah, it was.
Yeah. Yeah, but it doesn't hold a candle to your place. We're talking to Steven. I'm wearing the t-shirt. Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. We've had him on. We've had Tony on. Go to Cleveland. It's got the coolest stuff. Stop
he and I
hearing
actually,
us
Mike
talk
and I
about
been there
it.
together. So
Yeah, I try to bring everybody when I can to go see the Bucklands. So.
Yeah, I'm just rushing through this. Our audience has so much to say. So, okay, so great. So, where does Sabrina the Teenage Witch fall in all of it?
I don't want to talk over Mike. I feel like I've been talking the whole time. I don't just want to keep rambling.
No, trust me.
Because I have strong opinions about all these things.
I appreciate the things you have to say.
This is the forum for strong opinions. Please share.
My whole thing. Okay, so let me just start off by saying, when it comes to witchcraft and people's practicing and their commitment levels, to each his own. No harm, no foul, no judgment. It's all. But I do like to use the term Sabrina for those people who like to watch a TV show and then 2 days later, I'm a witch. I'm doing, and I'm like, oh, okay, Sabrina. So just the whole Sabrina thing just makes me laugh because I feel like it brought about that whole sect of people, if you want to say, who like to not actually practice it, but just like throw out some random words and things and act like they're actually practitioners. And I think if they would sit there and see the amount of work that people like myself and Ciel do on the daily, they'd be like, nah, I ain't down for that because that's too much work. So,
right.
But anyway, Ciel, go ahead. Like I said, I appreciate what you have to say. You're good. So
No, you're okay. Sabrina. On a personal entertainment level, I have very strong opinions about the new one, whether the Chaotic Adventures of Sabrina or whatever. I'm not going to get too much into that because that's just like a personal entertainment opinion. As far as the portrayal of witchcraft, it didn't bother me because they were specifically satanic witches, so they played into that. They had the Baphomet with the as above, so below symbol. I almost got sued by the temple of the Satanic Temple over that. But so they were a good example of satanic witches. In fact, there's one point where kind of at odds with a group of pagan witches. It's very peculiar how they chose to portray the pagan witches. I actually had more issue with that than I did with Sabrina and her aunts and their portrayal of it. I was cool with the way they were doing. I'm like, okay, they're satanic witches. I can roll with what's happening. Mm-hmm. Then they brought in the pagan witches, and it was just like, oh no, honey, what is you doing? It was just kind of a mess. Like they were very, I don't know, they were very vengeful, which I guess, let's be honest, if a bunch of pagan land spirits came back, they probably would be. So it wasn't necessarily that I had an issue with. I've actually, unfortunately, experienced many angry land spirits. So I don't get that. It was just very I don't know. It was just very weird the way they had them at war, I guess. I just found it very discordant. Thought it was very peculiar. They were all like risen gods versus actual pagans. So I felt like their inclusion of pagan witches was actually more detrimental than how they portrayed witches as satanic witches. It was very strange to me.
Right. And I'm going to put up this comment because it's a good launching part for all this before we move on to the power of perception. Or let's move into it through this. I'll be happy when Hollywood screenwriters run out of comic books. So that pagan witch versus satanic witch, that's assemble a team. Here are the white hats, here are the black hats. And we have this ongoing thing. And we have these little continuums within the team. I mean, hey, I'm a screenwriter. I'm a playwright and a novelist. That's how you do.
Right.
I think the problem is, and I can speak from, and everybody knows because they've taken the journey with us, especially Tanya and Michael, you were in our house talking about this to Tanya. How she looks has directly affected her business, which she's almost effectively completely closed down because she didn't meet the perception when she walked in the room. And we had someone in the chat room who said, yeah, when I show up in yoga pants, they're like, what am I paying for? Like, do you even know what you're doing? So as we get into these negative themes, tropes, it would be lovely to go, everybody is educated. And reality TV and comic books and TV shows, everybody goes, oh, that's not real life. That's a super blown up so that you entertain us. So everything has to be exaggerated like a punchline in a joke. But for some very complicated reason, that is not the case. People believe that before they take the time to find out what's in front. Thoughts on that?
We actually touched on this briefly when we were talking about this show. I've spoken about this a lot because I watch all the witchy media. I watch all the witchy shows. I'm gonna read it, watch it, whatever. If it's out there, I'm probably gonna find it. It's my preferred entertainment when I actually have the time for entertainment, which is not a lot. I am not bothered by fantasy magic because it has to be. You can't put actual witchcraft on a screen and have anybody want to watch that. You're gonna have an hour of a group of people standing in a circle doing this.
Yeah.
I actually said to
That's
Ciel,
all it's gonna be. That's all it's gonna be.
I would love for us to be able to create a reality show of what we do so people can see the truth in it. But Ciel was like, that would be canceled so fast because it'd be boring as hell.
Well,
So
right.
because like she said, there'd be a bunch of
If
people.
they were showing the reality, yes. There actually has been a production company who has attempted to TV show of that nature. They've approached friends of mine who declined because they knew that it would not be portrayed as real witchcraft. They'd sensationalize it like they do all reality shows.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, if they were showing the reality of it, no one would be that interested. They're going to show someone sitting at an altar for 20 minutes silently in meditation with spirit in the morning and maybe at their altar. And it's usually, magic is internal. Magic is intuitive. Most of it is internal. There's some speaking aloud for folks who connect with the magic that way, but it's still not something that you're going to be able to make an hour-long TV show out of. You have to have the flash and bang. You have to have the all of that in order for it to be a television show. And they do it to other things. Christianity, there's movies that Christians don't love, like the Legion, the Purgatory series, all of those things are not portraying actual Christianity. We have to understand that there's a difference there. There's an absolute difference there.
Well, one of the things that kind of bothers me the most, and especially how, Joey, we were talking, me, you, and Tanya that day, I find it hysterical that you hear the word witch and it's automatically and always assumed a female. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, well, the very first person who was accused, put on trial, and persecuted for witchcraft was a man.
Right.
And even though it was mostly women, it wasn't just female.
Right.
And even in modern day, you know, I used the reference of The Craft earlier. You see the character of Nancy, and people think that when you see a girl walking down the street who has that look to her, she's a witch. Mm-hmm. But then I'm the one walking down the street with a girl who looks like her, and actually I'm the witch.
Right.
So it's walking down the street with me.
Right.
Well, we're both witches in that case, but
and that so
but the irony of, you know, the reality is a lot of us are very plain and boring from the outside.
We're not bodies.
Yeah, we're not this big dramatic thing that's always, you know, it's, and like we were talking with Tanya, it's one of those, you know, she walks in a room, not one person is going to sit there and assume that she's a legitimate psychic reader or a witch practitioner because she's a cute blonde lady. And they're going to just think, you know, oh, she's just playing a part.
Yeah.
So
or doesn't care enough to look the part, or can't afford the costume.
Yeah. So costume, uniform.
so Howie asks, as we're going along here, and I want to come back to male witches, wizards, warlocks, all of that. Is there, Ciel, you were as the question was being asked, you were talking about its interior and, you know, it's personal and all that. Do you think there's a science to magic?
Absolutely. I do believe science is magic. My own personal tradition, when people ask me to describe my personal practice of witchcraft, I refer to based spirituality. Every spirit that I work with because they represent a natural primordial force that is scientifically proven to have caused life. So absolutely, magic is science and science is magic. They are one and the same. I believe magic is just a different type of science that we haven't figured out yet, and we will. I believe if given enough time, I believe that we will. I mean, there's always going to be the final mystery of what happens when we cross the veil. Be there. Right. I don't think there's any way to really quantify that, but up to that point, the things that we call magic are really, it's just energy. It's just different types of energy that we haven't been able to quantify or qualify yet. And we just don't have the technology to do it yet, but we will. And like you said, sufficient technology should not be indistinguishable from magic. Think about cell phones. Think about cell phones. That's magic. That's magic in your hand right there. They put sand in a phone. Most of those components are made from minerals. They put sand in a plastic case and you call someone around the world on it. That's absolutely magic. It's absolutely magic.
Yeah, and crystals running so many of our devices, and they have it.
Right.
Absolutely. What was I gonna say? And I think science is catching up. There are good people like Dean Radner who are doing those kinds of things. Folks, I don't know if you know this, but Isaac Newton is arguably one of the foundational fathers, one of the foundational parents of modern science. He spent most of his time working on alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
Like 80% of his surviving papers. And that's like a big, deep, dark secret because people don't understand. Alchemy is a wonderful nexus of science, magic, spirituality, intention, self-improvement. I've been studying alchemy forever. So I think that's very cool. So Howie says, perfect answer. So you guys are doing great. Let's go back to this witch wizard thing. What is the difference? Is there a difference between a witch and a wizard or a warlock?
I don't think so personally. I think it's just the titling. I don't like the gender stereotyping.
Right.
So to me, a wizard could be Ciel and a witch could be Mike, or vice versa, or both, or none. It's one of those, and that's why I stick to the term witch very much, because you could use the term warlock or wizard, fine, but I use the term witch because I'm trying to gender neutralize it. And granted, the practice is very goddess centric, but that doesn't mean that it's only for women. It's for anybody and everybody, and however they want to practice it. So
right. Some of the we talked about this on one of the, I think, Ciel, when you were a guest, to talk about crystals and stuff, but one of the leading authors about Stregheria, which is the Italian witchcraft that my family has the limit, is a male. So in acting now, we don't use the term actress anymore. We're all actors. That's what it said. So is a warlock, I get the idea of sort of like an Elvis collar on a robe and some pointy ears, and warlock feels a little cartoony. It feels a little the 1970s animated Lord of the Rings kind of thing.
There's been a lot of debate about the word warlock. There's been a lot of debate about the word warlock. There's the common perception that it means prayer, and the common folklore is that it was used to apply to men who, or people rather, not just men, but people who had betrayed their coven.
Okay.
That's folklore. There's actually nothing archaeologically to support this. If you dig down into the etymology of the word, and can also mean other things. So but it's still very common that that's how people associate the word warlock. And however, there's actually a large movement of male practitioners who are choosing to refer to themselves as warlocks for many reasons. Storm Fairy, he's one of the founders of one of the branches of the fairy tradition, Blue Rose, I think. He refers to himself as a warlock, and he has written extensively about why, as far as, and part of it has to do with the fact that witch is so automatically assumed to be feminine, and because of that was hard for him to connect with that word. There's a plethora of other goes into, but there's a large movement of men who are choosing to take that word back and use it in place of calling themselves a witch. And that's fine, because like I've mentioned before, the word witch is not this ancient positive thing that people think it is either. We're all really just rebranding at this point. So I don't think that there's any real difference of the energies that we're working with. It's more self-identification and what resonates with personal spirit.
Gotcha. Would you say that a wizard is sort of like a stylized witch, or is it more complicated than that?
I think it's probably more complicated. Wizardry, when I hear the term wizardry, I generally hear it referenced fantasy magic.
Yeah.
I don't hear it a lot in the actual magic user community. And there are some, of course, like Obronzel has called himself a wizard for a million years, and he dresses like Snape, or Dumbledore, so it's cool. But he's the rare exception. There's not a lot of people out there calling themselves wizards. So perception of it has been, when it's used, folks are often referencing fantasy magic.
Stephen, if you're still with us, did Raymond Buckland? There's some little snippet of something in my brain that's saying that Raymond Buckland referred to himself as a warlock. Maybe I'm confusing him with someone else. So please educate us on that. So folks, when I advertised the show, I had the Horned God and I had the Triple Goddess. And the Triple Goddess is something I've been writing about and studying. I guess that was sort of my whole introduction, I think, was through the Triple Goddess. So the Triple Goddess is the maiden, the mother, and the crone. So we talked a little bit about the negative side of the maiden, right? The braless, scantily clad, kung fu, hottie, the Alyssa Milano witch, right? Is this sort of the sexualized maiden. But Ciel, let's start with you. What in your own journey, and how do those manifest? Because I don't think that mother necessarily means you have to pop out a baby at all.
Right. Well, that is something that I actually have spent a lot of time on my path struggling with connecting with, because as I've spoken with Mike in depth, I'm one of those people who I don't really feel like I have a masculine side. I am 100% aligned with my feminine energy, and a lot of people struggle with that because they find me assertive, shall we say. Raging ball of fury, depends on who you're talking to. I consider those very much my feminine traits, and it's just my personal perception. I get a lot of flack, like, you're out of balance, blah blah blah, but let me do it. All right. And a lot of that has come about because of this inability to connect with that archetype. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is the whole concept of crone archetype is very recent. The triple goddess dichotomy in history did not refer to maiden, mother, or crone. When you referred to a triple goddess, it was because that goddess ruled over a triplicity of attributes. Like, she was a triple goddess because she ruled over midwifery, the hearth, and I believe it was sacred well. So that's what the original triple goddess was. The whole maiden, mother, crone thing is just more of the patriarchy trying to stuff us into a box. Because I just talk about, I was the female that modern paganism forgot, because I'm 45 years old and I've never had children. I'm incapable of having children. So at this point, I'm technically a crone. According to their ideology, I am a crone. Don't I look crone? And that's just a very weird idea for me, that I would be considered a crone simply because I'm no longer capable of having children. Not that I have any issue with crone. I'm all for that rain down hellfire hag energy. Let's come through. It's just a very weird idea that I have to stuff myself into this. Well, I'm an old wise sage now. I'm incapable of lightheartedness like the maiden, or nurturing like the mother. Like it's very pigeonhole, and I just for it. I've never resonated with it. It makes no sense to me that we would have this concept for women when we don't have it for men. And they've tried to build that around. They've tried to be like, oh well, we're just going to call them boys and lords and sages. And I'm like, y'all get to be sages. I got to be over here rocking the crone title.
What? And this may be my Jungian psychology interest spilling over, but he called them number one and number two. There's your shadow. There's all of that. But in the sense, I've always thought about the triple goddess as not a linear path, but almost like the Holy Trinity from Christianity, which stole everything from everybody. There's not an original idea in Christianity, and I say that without apology. That we all have aspects of the maiden, we all have aspects of the mother, we all have when we take care of our covered, that could be seen as mother. Does that have any merit at all? Am I fooling myself?
No, I do believe if you're going to work at all, then that is the most appropriate way to see them, honestly. We all have the ability to embody all of them, male and female alike, because those energies are not inclusive to just women. Men are young and fresh and new. They have the ability to be wide-eyed and naive, just like women. They contribute to giving. Kind of necessary to have them involved. You know, they will get old, and you know, they can never stop producing life, which is whatever. But still.
But they should.
But
good point.
No, because any 70-year-old man who goes, I'm not going around to see my kid's college education, too bad.
Right.
That's horribly selfish. Selfish.
Right. So they
yeah.
go through the same. Men go through the same stages of life women do. Not to say that the experience is identical, because men and women are different biologically. So obviously the experience is going to differ. And this is, and please understand, anybody watching, I 1000% include and men in these conversations. So you are absolutely included when I reference this. Everyone goes through their own process. So that it's going to be different for each person, but we all go through these cycles. We all embody these things. Just because I'm 45 doesn't mean that I can't be nurturing and motherly. I created a brand new tradition. I feel like I kind of fulfilled my motherly duty with that one.
Yeah, gave birth to it. Yeah.
Yep.
And I have cats that are so to be on duty there. But that is a nurturing energy, whether you are someone who advocates for the earth or advocates for animals or any kind of taking care of the earth type of energy, or other people or whatever. That's all nurturing mother energy, nurturing father energy. So it absolutely does apply. Just because I don't personally find that our triplicity of archetypes to be, and to me personally, doesn't mean that if you're going to work with it, that's a very good way to view it, because it is something we can all identify with at different points in our lives.
Right. Michael, I'm looking for a comment because there was a question for Ciel and I want to find it. What is your take on the triple goddess?
Yeah, stop me from talking.
No, you're fine.
Oh, no.
I would
fine. We're good.
But actually, my version of the triple goddess is probably different than Ciel's, which, again, talking about, you know, the reality of witchcraft is everybody's practice is their own. So what I may do and it's right for me doesn't mean it's not right if somebody else does different. So we all have our own thing. For me, I believe that the ideology of the triple goddess is being able to empower all aspects of yourself lovingly and willingly, and be able to, I can accept in my own self that, you know, I have an old spirit, but I can be young and sassy, but also caring at the same time. And I think that, you know, when doing my magics, that's what keeps me more grounded, is being able to be all things at once. Because if I'm trying to go into it like a smartass know-it-all, thinking I'm the almighty crone, I'm probably going to flop and fail, because I'm going into it with an ego. If I'm going into it being caring, I may not get a good result, because I'm not doing the true intention of what needs to be done, because I'm too worried about others' opinions. And if I go into it too carefree, same thing, because I'm not looking at it as seriously as I should. So I think for me personally, like I said, it's just the mentality of, you know, combining all, and again, it's not about masculine or feminine in the reality of it when I do it, but it's using that triple goddess energy as using all aspects of who you will be, who you were, and who you are now, all at the same time.
Yeah. And that's what I found. I spent decades trying to murder my shadow. And then I was like, wait a minute, my shadow is my ally, my shadow is my friend. And there are times when my shadow can save my ass if I allow it to. And I've done a lot of writing about that. So let's so awesome. So Ciel, can you talk about the discovery of witches? I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
No, I love those books. Cool. It's one of my top 3 favorite series as far as books go. In fact, de Clermont is a family name. So don't be surprised if I pop up in public as Ciel de Clermont eventually, because I just
oh, awesome.
Claiming it.
Be that woman, I don't care. But it's a really wonderful series. I'm not caught up on the television series. I'm only partway into season 3, so I still have to finish season 3. But it follows the book series very quickly, or closely rather. So I don't anticipate that it's going to differ. But it's a really wonderful book featuring witches, vampires, and beings that they call demons, but they're not demons in the sense of they come from hell. Demons. They're actually, it's the Daemons, like daemons, but they.
Oh yeah.
So they're more just a supernatural being versus, you know, hell being. And it centers around between Diana Bishop, who is a type of witch called a Weaver, and her relationship with a vampire named Matthew de Clermont, and which tickled me when it came out. I got that name. It was very fun for me. But it's a really wonderful series, and it follows a lot of mythology around alchemy, which is really funny because when you were talking about alchemy earlier, that book series actually came to mind. So I'm like tickled that she brought it up, because I kept thinking, like, that book is Diana. She's not, it's a whole thing. The character Diana Bishop is a PhD who studies the history of alchemy, and she finds this old just designated Ashmole's 812, and it unlocks like all these powers, and adventure ensues. And there's traveling back to the past and all kinds of fun stuff. But they talk about the science of alchemy a lot in that book, and I find that part actually very interesting. But if you're looking for, I don't want to get. I feel like if I get too excited, I'll start to spoil it by accident, and I don't want to actually do that in case there's anyone who hasn't read it. But if you like that type of book, I would absolutely recommend reading it. Deborah Harkness is a fantastic writer. I'm actually reading the 4th book in the series currently. I'm in the middle of Times Convert, if I could speak. It's a really great book series. I definitely recommend it. It does talk about the science behind magic and the origins of witches and vampires and scientific, which I actually really love.
Nice. Michael, are you familiar with the series?
I watched the first episode on Netflix and then forgot about it.
Okay.
So that question was asked to Ciel because I was
yeah. When you talk, we're talking about vampires and witches. What's your guys' position on Anne Rice's Mayfair Witches? Are you familiar?
I am. Partially. I read the first 3 books in the series a bajillion years ago. Right. They're peculiar. I don't really know what to like. Their whole claim to being witches is the fact that they summon the spirit Lasher.
Right.
That's the only thing that they do. That, my understanding, because I've read all 3 books, and really the only thing they do is summon the spirit. They have control of this one spirit named Lasher. Now, to be fair, I've only read the first 3. I've read The Witching Hour, Lasher, and then Taltos. So I read those 3. So I know that the series does eventually go on to overlap with the vampire series.
It does.
I know that the main character from the Witch series hooks up with Lestat at some point. Incidentally, I've only read the first 3 books of the vampire series as well. So
I have read every book, and now there won't be anymore because Anne passed away. But I found Rowan Mayfair so insufferable as a person, so arrogant and insufferable. So.
The characters weren't incredibly likable. I'm not. Yeah. It took me like a year and a half to get through the first book. I'm not gonna lie. No joke. It took me a year and a half because the first half is so stale. It's so dry. It doesn't move. It just. I would put it down and then wander off for months at a time. And then at a certain point, once the spirit is actually introduced, it does begin to pick up and become more interesting. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not that person who's ever going to tell anyone you're not a real witch, because witchcraft is a personal practice, but I don't know.
Right. It's a very narrow definition. So let's get into, as we're closing out, let's get into social media. TikTok, TikTok and Instagram are like
Ciel's favorite term that you love, aesthetic witch.
Yeah. Oh, I love that term. I've been dropping it since you used it on the show with credit, because I'm a big credit guy. So what? So what is?
I keep doing all the talking. I got opinions, so if I get going, you're just going to sit there and look pretty for the rest of the show. So
I do that easy, so I'm okay with it.
Especially in those glasses.
See, Steve was right when saying they look good.
So have at it. School us on aesthetic witches and Instagram and TikTok and
aesthetic witches. What I mean when I say that is witchcraft as your aesthetic. Essentially, you dress because it's witchy, you decorate because it's witchy, but that's the end of your witchcraft involvement. It's just about the look versus practice. And that's fine. I mean, if that's your aesthetic, that's your aesthetic. That's cool, you know, but there's a perception that comes along with it that I think can be somewhat harmful, the way it's being presented on social media. Um, I kind of go of two minds, because I'll be the first one, like you saw my post about Whole Foods, Becky,
Yeah.
about, you know, the gatekeepers get very upset about the social media witches, the TikTok witches, all of that. And it's really unfortunate because it can be very detrimental to the newer witches. Um, so I will defend them. I absolutely do defend them. And the thing is I love the content that they're creating. They're creating pictures and altars and all these, they're staging these beautiful settings in the, you know, witchcraft aesthetic, and they're gorgeous. I love that sort of thing. It would be my aesthetic even if I was not a witch.
But they're not always reality for a lot of
But
people.
that's not reality, even for me who loves that stuff. I don't have, I'm not set up like they're portraying on Instagram. Sure, I would love to be, but that's not the reality. Most of us don't have that living situation and or the money to invest in what they're doing, because you have to look at what they're actually doing. There's a lot of money going in the environments that they're creating. And sure, you can create your environment over time to eventually get there, but you know, they're just snapping their fingers and overnight creating this room, this altar, this outfit. You know, they're going out in nature and setting up these beautiful ritual settings and all of this stuff, and it's beautiful. The thing is, I'm not bashing them. I love the content. I think it's beautiful. I consider it art. The problem I see, the issue that I believe comes into play, is when they're advertising this content, it's not just, they're not saying witch aesthetic, they're saying witch. They're saying witch. It's going to perpetuate the perception that this is what you have to do and be in order to be a witch. Right. And it's not so much that you want to be that way. Be that way. I don't care. It's that it makes you think that you have to be that way. And if you're new to the craft, if you're new to your path and you're still trying to figure it out, there's a lot of content on the internet that you just, there's a lot. And it's
a
not
lot of these platforms though too, sorry to interrupt you, Ciel, but a lot of these platforms have the whole mentality that these influencers make money off of doing these things.
right. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't realize and understand, like Ciel was saying, like you might have somebody who's working McDonald's, making minimum wage, seeing this person who's probably making six figures by posting this life that probably isn't something they actually participate in. And it's making these people think that they have to go out and buy the biggest, the best, the most expensive. They like Ciel was saying, you know, they have to decorate their house a certain way. And that's not at all. I mean, like she says, beautiful. It's just not the truth in it, or it doesn't have to be your truth in it, I should say.
Right. And this is the sadness of sort of humanity, because, you know, I'm in the historical reenactment community, but as a performer more than and the debates are, oh, what's your thread count? And and if you love the thing and you want to show up and do it, if you when I started doing my pirate stuff, I was doing it as a volunteer, so I taped over the brand name of my lace-up boots. Yeah. People are like, well, what are those boots? And it's like, well, I'm not comfortable walking barefoot, and I'm not ready to buy $250 bucket boots. When I started getting paid, then I did that. And it drives a lot of people out, and you watch a lot of wasted time. I want to ask you guys about, and it's not real prevalent, but I do see these witches on TikTok especially. Mm-hmm. They do card readings, mm-hmm. and they have a lot of opinions, and they're a little bit philosopher, and they're a little bit teacher, but they're very, very defensive. So they'll put up people's comments on the screen and scold them. And is there a place for that kind of defensiveness and confrontationalness in the work? I try not to, for me in my work, I try not to be confrontational. I just do the work. Am I wrong to kind of get bristly about that? What's your thought on that?
I think for me, I would need to know why they were getting defensive and what they were getting defensive about.
People are maybe saying that let me think of some examples. They're coming on to, there's a whole TikTok thing where you do a whole thing where you just put up comments, like YouTubers used to do it too. Here's a show with nasty comments, and I'm going to talk directly to the commenter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess I'm kind of torn on that because I see the need to not be confrontational because it doesn't always benefit. That being said, I also have some very strong opinions that lead to confrontation, whether I want them to or not. Case in point, my supportive Whole Foods Becky. Someone became very offended by that and took to their own wall, calling me some very vulgar British insults. It was real classy.
I did get to see the back of it, so yeah, that was ignorant.
And I did not. The thing is I voice my opinion, and I voice it very strenuously. And I'll be honest, I took a lot of people off because I have a lot of opinions that don't really jive with the modern concept of witchcraft and New Age magic or what have you. But that being said, I didn't call her out by name, and I don't typically do that. I think that there's a place to push back against the ignorance, but I think we have to be mindful of how we do it. I didn't go after this person because they posted, talking smack Becky. I didn't go after them on their feed or on their wall. And it wasn't just them. I didn't target them specifically. This was something that had come across my feed at least a dozen times by multiple people and was just on my nerves. So I finally decided to say something. I didn't tag any of the people. I didn't target anybody. I just shared the meme that was becoming so prevalent and voiced my opinion that people were being kind of, schmucks about Becky who wants to buy sage at Whole Foods and call herself a witch. The whole meme was about, I don't even want to be a witch anymore now that Becky thinks she can go buy sage at Whole Foods and smudge her house, and now she thinks she's a witch. Who are you to tell her she's not? Yeah. If saging her house is all it takes for Becky to consider, you have no authority to tell her otherwise. And neither do I, nor does anybody. And if your conviction in your path, if being a witch is your identity as a witch is so weak that Becky buying sage at Whole Foods and smudging her house and calling herself a witch is enough to make you not even want to follow your path anymore, you need to think about why you're on it and the fact that you may be on it for the wrong reasons and using it for other things. And I'm seeing that a lot. People are pretending to be witches, and I say pretending not because they're practicing magic that I don't agree with, but because they're not practicing. It's literally just something they're paying lip service to because it helps them sell their product. The same person who attacked me even said in the comments, the only longer was because it helped her sell her product. And that really kind of rubbed me wrong as well, because it's something I live and breathe every day.
Right.
So they're commodifying it, and not that you shouldn't, make money as a witch, we got to eat too, but saying you're a witch just so witches will buy your product, it's just really obnoxious.
Yeah, and then copying to it publicly.
Right, admitting to it.
Not a good marketing plan.
Put it out there on public and was just like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. It's cool, whatever. I was like, all right, but I let it go. I didn't say anything directly to her, and I didn't call her out by name. She shared a screenshot of my profile, but so those are two very, very different. I pushed back against the topic, not the person, and I think that's kind of the difference. Like, I do believe there does need to be some pushback, or else sometimes there needs to be pushback. Sometimes people need to be checked, but how we go about it matters.
Yeah.
And we live in a very cancel culture as is. So like one of the things that I could understand, like you were talking about the people reacting to the comments, is you're having a bunch of people who have, this set of brass balls hidden behind a fake picture on an internet site. And they're able to sit there and make comments, talk outlandish, and say rude things. They may practice, they may not have a clue what the person's really doing, but because they're able to have that empowerment, they'll go and say these things. So I can understand where sometimes the influencer would get like just to the point of, like, okay, this is enough and I'm going to confront it. But at the same time too, it's not really helping anybody by doing that, because if you are trying to legitimately go out there and do your practice and make a you know, an honest living doing these things, that kind of in the end is going to just make you look bad. So
yeah. And that's great. We've come to the end, but let's, you know, inspiration and education are huge for me. So to those listeners out there who have listened for the past hour and went, this is so damn complicated. I have an interest, but now it scares me. And is it worth it? Each one of you, Michael, we'll start with you and we'll give Ciel the last word before we say goodnight. What is your advice? Michael, you always give such good advice, no matter what the subject is. What's your advice for those people who are listening?
I would say if it's something that does not interest you, don't bother with it. But educating yourself definitely is, you know, still an important thing, because again, you know, how we discussed earlier, a lot of people automatically hear the word witch and they think that, you know, we're a byproduct of Satan. And that's not what 99% of us probably are. Yeah. So educating yourself, whether you want to participate or not, if you do want to learn the craft and educate yourself and try to make a practice of it, understand it's going to be like a 40-hour-a-week job. I mean, it's not something you wake up one day, go to Whole Foods and buy a thing of sage and you're a witch. You have to actually put work into it, effort, daily commitment, keep educating, continue educating, doing more work. I mean, I'm 46 right now, and I feel like a toddler with my abilities sometimes compared to some people who might be in their 20s. But I mean, you know, so it's just a matter of always trying to better yourself and keep doing better and more. So
yeah, what Baryshnikov said, I don't try to dance better than anybody. I try to dance better than myself.
Yeah,
that is a full-time job, folks.
Yep.
When you apply that standard, you don't have time for anything else. Ciel, last word for you.
Anybody who wants to know more about witchcraft or has any interest in it at all, first piece of advice would be to read every last little possible thing on witchcraft that you can get your hands on. Everything. Books, online, everything. Like, I can't stress this enough. I've been practicing since I started my path, became very serious about around 18 or 45 now. I'm not going to do the math. It makes me sad. Read everything, because like I said, I founded my own tradition, but I did that after 2 decades of studying every tradition I could get my hands on. I'm not going to claim to be an expert because I'm not an initiate of these traditions, but I have spent time studying many various traditions, not just witchcraft, but voodoo. I have a very close personal relationship with Papa Legba. So, you know, there's a lot out there and you should read all of it. And I see a lot of people come out the gate with, I'm a new witch. And y'all, please stop calling yourself baby witches. You're not. Your name doesn't mean you're a child. Don't let anybody treat you like you are, okay?
I have an image. It's not a good one of a baby witch.
Witches come along and I see a lot of, I need to find a coven. Is there any coven around there? Can I join a coven? Coven. Because they think that's the only way they're going to learn. And I can appreciate that, because when I started at 15, there was no internet, didn't exist. That's right, y'all. I'm older than the internet. How about that? And I'm from a small cow town in Central California. The only witches in the area were the Catholic Mexican brujas. So that's the example I had. Paganism, like I told in the last story, PBS came along and saved me from that and introduced me to paganism. So go PBS. But I spent a long time studying the various traditions, trying to find the one that spoke to me. And none of them ever truly did. They did to an extent. And then I'd hit a wall somewhere and be like, well, this ain't it. On to the next. I was like Polly Shore and the Son of Love for 3 semesters, you know. So I read everything you can and discard anything that does not speak to your heart. That is going to be the 100% North Star to guide you on your path. If you read something and you're like, I don't really like the feel of that, gone, out the door. You don't have to do it. You don't have to freaking do it, y'all. If anybody tells you that you have to do something to be a witch or you're not a real witch, give them the finger, because that's not how we do things. All right. You, whatever kind of witch you want to be, however you want to witch it up, pimp your craft, do your thing. All right. Read everything. Don't be so eager to run off and join a coven, because when you do, you're only going to learn witchcraft according to that coven. And that's not to say that they don't have beautiful teachings to share with you, but you're going to learn magic according to their tradition. people who come to my tradition with absolutely no knowledge of other paganism, I require that they spend time studying other traditions, because I don't want anybody on my path who is only here because it's the only thing they know.
Nice.
The only thing you know everything as much as you can. Like, obviously you're not going to know everything. I'm still working on that myself. So it's a lifelong endeavor, and it will be. And that's exactly what Mike said. Don't ever stop reading. Don't ever stop expanding. Don't ever stop learning. Don't ever say, well, I've learned everything. I'm top echelon witch. I'm good. I don't need to learn anything else. Because yeah, you do. You absolutely do. If you don't, you're gonna end up one of these really bitter old gatekeeping pagans telling all the witch talk pagans and witches that they shouldn't exist. And they have every right to exist. They're adapting magic to the modern era, and it has to. Collective consciousness, social media, witches, fantasy witches in the media, television series, movies, animation, anime, all of these things, books, they're in the public consciousness. And once art becomes part of the public consciousness, it becomes its own thing, as I'm sure you know, and spirit speaks through art. So be open to however spirit wants to speak with you. If you're getting a message because you were binge watching Seven Deadly Sins on Netflix, that's fine. Get your message from Seven Deadly Sins on Netflix. All right. Team Meliodas all the way. Okay. That's fine. Don't just slough it off as, oh, it's an anime. How can spirit be talking to me? Because it wants to, and it can. All right. So if that's what you're investing your higher self, and that's where art and our investment in art comes from, our higher self, our id, the part of ourself that taps into the universe and the energetic mycelium that connects all of us to the universe. That art is part of that, and it can speak to you through that. So don't pass up the signs just because it's not how homegirl over on Instagram did it. So what? You're not her, and you don't have to be her. So don't buy into the hype that you have to be a certain type of way. You can stop me anytime now. Seriously.
I'm kind of watching the clock because people start falling off after an hour. They got stuff to do.
Read everything and do your own thing. That's basically
guys. I promised you passion. I've modeled you knowledge and experience. I am absolutely honored that Ciel is a contributor to this show. I feel like that's an achievement. If that's the kind of contributors we're drawing to this show, we're doing something right. 110 episodes in. Michael, thank you for introducing us to Ciel.
Of course, I know how to put great things together. That's all
you do. It's a talent, and that's magic. That is absolutely magic, because that's called synergy. Yep. You take all that, you put it together, and it creates something. Yes, what a great button. Last thing to do, Miss Tanya's first home away from home has not worked out, so she's in transit to her second home away from home. But tomorrow is her birthday, so we just wish her, Tanya, happy birthday. We miss you. She wanted to be on the show.
I would be more than okay if the two of you sang happy birthday to her. I just would appreciate it.
It's okay. It's all good. Else. We're gonna
I felt horrible, but I'm terribly tone deaf.
She and I don't know if you guys saw last week, but she came to the show at like 10 minutes before it ended, and she's like, "Why did you start 10 minutes early?" So the poor girl, that sounds condescending, but that poor girl, she had to deal with a 1 hour time zone change, which was
time change itself
messed her up for 2 weeks, and now where she's moving to is back in our time zone. So it's gonna be okay, but it's just been weird. So I miss her like crazy. Thank you guys for helping to fill the void. Good night, everybody. Join us next week. I have no idea what next week's show is, because the bigger the guest, the more the hassle.
I say what you should do, Joey, is take to Facebook and have people start submitting ideas for next week's show.
Well, there is a publicist who's maybe working on a new guest, but I'm going to see. But that's what I'll do. If that doesn't happen, I'll go tomorrow and say, what do you want me to talk about for an hour?
Yep.
And then we'll do it. But thank you both so much. Everyone, join us next week for something in the Outer Realms, where the paranormal and the supernatural become the normal and the natural indistinguishable from magic. See what I did there? Good night, everybody. Take care, you two.